Hi, in this video, we're looking at the speaking section of the IELTS exam. I'll take you through all three parts of the test, show you real examples so you know what to expect, and hopefully help you understand how the exam works in a real life setting. The speaking test is usually the last part of your IELTS exam, and it can be on the same day or a different day from the other sections. If it's on a separate day, it's usually up to 7 days after the other sections, but sometimes before the other three sections. Most test takers prefer the speaking test to be on a different day because after finishing reading, listening, and writing, you are pretty tired and most probably not in the mood for speaking. So, what happens? The test takes place in a room with just you and the examiner there. You need to arrive early because your identity needs to be checked before you enter the room. So you're going to need your identification document, the same one you use to register for the exam. It doesn't matter whether you've signed up for a paper-based version or the computer-delivered version of IELTS, the speaking test is still in a separate room with an examiner, and it's all happening live. However, in some countries and only in some test centers, especially post-COVID, the speaking test can be delivered through a high-quality video call with a certified examiner. In that case, you're alone in the room and there's a screen in front of you. It's still live, of course, but the examiner is not physically present in the room. The speaking test is the same for both academic and general IELTS. And one good thing about it is that it's actually pretty short. It typically takes between 12 and 14 minutes. So you know when you walk in, it's all going to be over in less than 15 minutes. One thing that you need to be aware of is that the test is recorded. So examiners have a stopwatch to keep track of time and a voice recorder. This is done for quality control and fairness. If there's ever a question about your score, your answers can be marked again by a different examiner for a second opinion. This is a standard procedure to make sure all candidates are assessed fairly and consistently. Let's now look at the format of the exam. The speaking test is divided into three parts, and they gradually increase in difficulty. Part one lasts about 4 to 5 minutes, and the examiner will ask you questions about everyday topics that are related to you. So, all questions are personal. Things like your hometown, your job, your daily routine, things you read, watch, food you like, hobbies, technology you use. It's a very long list of possibilities, but once again, it's all about you. You'll be asked about three different topics during this part of the test. Each topic usually has 3 to 4 questions. So in total, you answer about 10 to 12 questions in this section. A good answer in this section is typically between 2 and 4 sentences, but more on that later. Part two of the IELTS speaking test is called the long turn. In this section, you'll be given a card with a topic and 3 to 4 bullet points related to the topic that you need to cover in your answer. You're allowed 1 minute to read the card and prepare your answer, and then you must speak for up to 2 minutes. This part is designed to test your ability to speak fluently on a single topic without interruptions. So the examiner won't be asking you any questions, they're just listening now. After you finish speaking, and before moving on to part three, The examiner may ask a quick follow-up question to round off part two. This is just a way to close the section naturally. The question will be related to your topic, but your answer needs to be really short. The last part of the speaking test moves away from personal questions and focuses on abstract concepts. The questions are no longer about you, but they are related to the topic you talked about in part two. In 4 to 5 minutes, you'll be asked to explain opinions, compare ideas, evaluate ideas, or speculate about future events. So you need more complex language and well-developed answers. Typically, you answer between 4 to 6 questions on one topic, but this really depends on how long and detailed your responses are. If your answers are short and underdeveloped, the examiner will ask more questions. If you're aiming for band 7 and above, part 3 is the opportunity to truly demonstrate your language skills. What you see here are examples of part 1 questions, and you have two topics here: hometown or village and accommodation. A good answer in this section usually has 2 to 4 sentences, which translates to 15 to 20 seconds of your speech per question. You need one sentence to answer the question directly, and 1 to 3 sentences, depending on the question, to explain. Maybe give a reason, an example, or some extra detail that you want to mention. What you can notice is that for some questions, examiners can ask an additional why question. So, for example, question 4 in the first topic says, would you say your hometown or village is a good place to live? If in your answer you don't give any reasons and you just say yes or no, the examiner will definitely ask you why to get you to speak more. A very good answer to this question would be yes, I think my hometown is a great place to live, especially for families. This is the direct answer to the question. And now we explain and add some details. It has a good mix of modern facilities and green spaces, and the cost of living is quite reasonable. The only downside is the traffic, but overall, it's a safe and comfortable place to be. So, it's a good idea when practicing part 1 questions to always ask yourself an additional why question and try to expand your answers by explaining, giving reasons, or some details. Moving on to see an example of a part 2 cue card. Remember, the examiner will give you a card that contains the topic and 3, sometimes 4 bullet points to help you structure your answer. You will also be given a piece of paper and a pencil because you have a minute to prepare, and you may want to take some notes. In this example, the prompt is asking you to describe something you own, which is very important to you. In your response, you should say where you got it from, how long you've had it, and what you use it for. A great way to approach part 2 is to use the bullet points just as an initial guide, but don't stop there. You should really expand on each one with some extra details. Instead of just answering what's on the card, try to add descriptions, personal experiences, or reasons to make your response more natural. One little thing that you should be aware of here are the rounding of questions. While you're speaking, the examiner is silent, they're just listening. But when you're done, the examiner needs to move on to part 3, but they also need to sort of close this section and somehow respond to your answer. So they may ask you a very simple question that requires a very short answer from you. In this example, after you've talked about an object that is very important to you, they may ask, Is it valuable in terms of money? And your answer should simply be yes, it's very expensive, or no, it's not really valuable at all. So just a sentence. This signals the end of this section. Rounding off questions are not there to test your language. They're simply used to transition to the next section and make the whole process of examining sound just a bit more natural. This brings us to the last section of the speaking exam and the most difficult one, mostly because the questions relate to abstract topics and they are not about you. Part three of the IELTS speaking section is considered the most challenging because it's designed to elicit complex language structures. However, this doesn't mean that candidates at lower bands can't answer these questions. Everyone can respond. But this section allows higher band candidates to demonstrate their full range of language skills. Even a band 5 test taker can understand and answer with shorter sentences. But if you're aiming for band 7 or above, this is your time to shine. Ideally, answers in part 3 should be well structured, resembling a paragraph format where you make a point, expand on it, and provide explanations and details. But more on this in a separate video. I have a few notes on the nature of the exam, which can help you understand what is really going to happen. Despite how it looks, the speaking test is not a natural conversation. There's nothing natural about it. It follows a very strict scripted format, and the examiners have to stick to it. What does that mean for you? Well, the examiner is not there to have a discussion with you. They're following a predetermined script and they cannot interact naturally. They can only say what's in the script. They can smile or use their body language to maybe encourage you, but that's it. The only part where examiners have some flexibility is part 3. That's when they can challenge your answers and ask some follow-up questions. All in all, the exam is really like a job interview. So, what's your role in all of this? It's simple. Use every second of the exam to showcase your language skills. Show off your vocabulary, fluency, grammar, pronunciation, because the whole thing is less than 15 minutes. This is your chance to prove what you can do, so make the most of it.